how does someone living in the middle of nowhere
Right.
get their stuff listened to? Not just in the door, but actually listened to and not in the bin.
Right. Well, I mean, and that, that's been a problem even when people were solely using entertainment lawyers to shop for record deals. And so that used to be the case. You'd have to hire an entertainment lawyer who already knew some labels and had some connections, who then could shop your stuff around. And most big labels would not accept a demo if it was unsolicited, if it was not sent by so-and-so Esquire. So, so now, I mean, social media, we talk about our friend Jonathan Simpkin. That guy's all over Twitter. You want to head a hold of him? Tweet him. Message him on Twitter. He'll read it. You'll see it. Right? It's like that's sort of the case now. You can.
His Twitter is quite a thing.
I know. Right? I know. But I mean, that's those. They're accessible. I mean, I see. The guy who owns Dynalone Records posting all the time, for instance. Yeah. He's easy to get a hold of, Joel. I mean, I think that's the way to do it. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You don't even have to put anything in the mail anymore. You just got to find someone's email address or hit them up on social media, hit them up on one of their accounts.
Welcome to the Vocal Lab. I'm Sarah Ramsey, and this show aims to pull back the curtain on the entertainment industry, where veterans give up-and-coming artists some of the information they wish they'd had when they were just starting out. Sort of a music industry primer, if you will. Thanks for joining us on the Vocal Lab. This is actually part 2 of our interview. So if you haven't caught part 1 yet, head back to the episode right before this one and get all caught up, and then join us back here. We'll see you soon. What are the elements that have gone into your favorite projects to work on?
Well, I mean, obviously having a great band. And I mean, there's a lot of okay bands, but the odd time when you get a great one and they've just got such cool ideas and you can feed off each other. And, that really does make for good stuff, I think. Comfort, certainly the artists I've known for a little longer, it's comfortable. They can come in and feel comfortable, and it's easy to get stuff done and to get them to be vulnerable and, let loose and have a good time. Right. And you capture that for sure in the recording. It makes so much difference in the end when the performances feel like something. You get goosebumps right when you hear them. So that's a big thing. I've had the odd project where, I got this famous session guy who's going to play on it. And I'm kind of like, all right, whatever. Because I've gotten stuff from famous session people before and I still got to fucking, edit it, chop it all up and stuff. It ain't perfect. So, it's like, you never know. You never know. It might be a vibe and it's just that it is. It's got to be vibe and having a really great band or something like that come in. Yeah. Because it's not so much for me. It's not so much the gear or the studio or the whatever. It's all about, just again, that song. Is it a great song? And did we give her? Yeah.
We have listeners who've never worked with a producer before. I think this is actually a piece of the process that is a little bit behind the curtain for younger artists.
Absolutely.
In the spirit of pulling back that curtain and making expectations clear for emerging artists. Can you talk about how you structure your rates? I'm not asking necessarily for you to talk about dollar figures, but more about, hourly versus day rate versus song versus project. And is it always the same? Does it differ from project to project? But what should an artist expect when they decide to work with a producer?
Totally. I mean, I guess some guys do hourly or even a day rate or something like that. Usually when I'm working on a project, I am producing, and usually it's over a long period of time, because there's a period of time where I'm getting demos, then there's the recording, and then there's the mix. Like that's kind of the short stuff at the end. It's really the preparation work in the beginning, picking the right songs, giving the band time to practice them, making sure they're great, getting together beforehand to do a pre-production session where we'd sit in a room, maybe their rehearsal space or in my studio here or something. They'd play their song. I'd maybe suggest some changes, some this, some that, and some whatever. and then they've got some time to work on those changes before we do go into the tracking day and lay it all down. I do a per song rate, and it pretty much, barely covers my time investment into each song, right? So, I budget it. I probably put about 60 hours into a song from pre-production to the end of the recording. So yeah, I kind of base my rate on that, and I do a per song rate, and I typically include my home studio in that. Just because, again, it's easier to just call it one rate, and we come in here and do overdubs, and maybe we're downtown in one of the big rooms for drums or whatever, or I've done them here too. But I like a per song rate because then the onus is on me to get it done in a timely manner. And I'm good with communicating with the artist that, hey, we're not here to screw around and experiment. We're here to lay it down and work, right? So typically, we get the job done and it's done in a timely manner, and then there's nothing hidden at the end. Like with an hourly, it's like, build up, and then who knows what it's going to be at the end. And also then if I know ahead of time what it's going to be, I usually take a 50% deposit up front to reserve time and start the project and yada yada, right? So for me, it's good to know what the budget is going in, and then I keep it on budget, right? So and to the best of your knowledge, is that a pretty common way that producers work? I think so, especially working with indie artists. Obviously, if you're working with a signed artist and they've got a big enough label, usually you're just handing them a bill at the end, and even you're paying for all the band's food and everything and whatever, right? And keeping all that organized, and that's fun and all. But yeah, for independent budgets, I find that's the best way to do it, and I think most guys do it that way. Yeah. Usually the hour per hour guys are guys that might be more engineers, in terms of that, and they get things in and out. They own a studio. They're just show up, set up. Yeah. Here's your mix. See you later. Right. Yeah. I put my name on it or not. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
So where I'm more like, I'm proud to have my name on it. I'm going to work my ass off on it and make sure I'm happy with it. Right.
Well, and as such, you also have choice about which projects you're taking on, and you probably don't take on projects that you're not proud to have your name on either.
Often. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. There's, I'm still happy to assess or to advise, rather, I should say, any brand new groups that may not be ready to do a recording of whatever caliber I think I am. I'm happy to say, hey, listen, guys, hunker down for 6 months. Go practice every day. Go write a bunch of songs. Come back to me. Let's chat again. Right? Like it's not a closed door by any means. The other thing is because I'm an artist too. I came from the guy in the band, so I feel like that gives me definitely an understanding of who I'm working with, but also I'm very empathetic towards that. And the last thing I want to do is waste anybody's money when they're not ready to spend it, right? Or to record the wrong songs. I'm very upfront about that kind of stuff. And I've absolutely lost gigs as a result because people didn't like the fact that I didn't like their songs. So, or not that I didn't like them, but I felt that they weren't any good. And that's just the way it is, right?
And I think that there's a time and a place to give people the space to explore and learn. And that's really, frankly, I think that's more of a learning environment. Yeah. Like as a teacher, I don't think it's my job to tell anybody you're not good.
Right.
That's not my job. My job is to help people in the exploration process. Yeah. It is different when somebody is getting to the point where they are spending money with an expectation of a product at the other side that is a sellable product.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That is where that is where they are asking for somebody's opinion and discretion around the saleability of that product.
100%, right?
So time and place.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it does. And I mean, obviously I don't come across as you suck, right?
No, of course not. You're not a dick.
But there's definitely no, I don't feel like anyone's getting helped if you're just pumping everyone's tires and taking everyone's money willy-nilly.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because unfortunately, I know people like that, and they have a bad rep.
Yeah.
So, all right, what do you do,
right? For artists who do happen to be signed to a label, does the producer typically get hired by the label or by the artist?
That's interesting too, right? I think it can happen both because, it might be the artist really wants that producer, and if the label agrees with it, typically that's how they would go. Or certainly there are situations where the label, signs a band and goes, hey, I really want you to try working with this, or just talk with this producer, see if you guys vibe, and that might work out too. And sometimes it's because the label can, has an arrangement, maybe an arrangement or whatever with that producer, but they got a rate probably with that producer maybe, or they've agreed on something. Hey, I'll give you gigs and give me, 10% on or whatever. Nonetheless, they're still not going to do that to somebody who they don't trust because that's their product they're making, right? So however the deal's made, ideally it's because they trust that person and they know that person's going to bring it to the finish line for them. So, but yeah, it can totally happen either way. And I find that, it's like most of the label bands I've worked with, the labels kind of stayed out of it, which is great because they've left us to do our thing and then deliver it, and usually they're happy. So
yeah. Let's talk about the relationship between the songwriting process and the pre-production process, where there's often some editing of the song structure and some of that, but it's different than songwriting, but it's not unrelated.
Yes, definitely. So in those kind of instances, and now, when I do end up writing with artists I work with, it's usually because, either they haven't been able to get to it themselves or they flat out asked me, right? But I start always by trying to encourage them to, if I don't think a chorus is a good enough chorus, or if a song needs a chorus or whatever have you, I tell them that. I'm like, can you go back and rewrite this, or try writing a part like this for this, or whatever.
That chorus is a verse. It's not a chorus.
There you go. Right. Exactly. So I try and get them to take a crack or two at it first before I, provide any sort of, big changes, big ideas that are like a different chord structure, a different melody. Because I can write that stuff, but then it's me writing it. It's not the artist writing. And if they can come to a place where I'm like, that's it. That's way hookier than the last bit or whatever. That's way better for everybody. Right. But in that pre-production process, I'll be sitting there, I'll be like, hey, give me the title of the song. I'll start kind of making notes as I'm listening to it. Sometimes right away, I'll like put my hand up, be like, hey, that was like 3 minutes of no vocals. Let's just try that again. We'll start there. And we kind of work through the song like that, right? And eventually we get to the end and I'll play it through again. If I feel like it vibes the whole way through, then it's like, okay, great. That's a great arrangement. Now, you got to tighten up that bass part. You got to tighten up those drum parts. Take a look at that vocal line in this part and see if you can come up with something else or whatever kind of a thing. But that's sort of that pre-production process to the point where the song is ideally the finished arrangement and melody and chord progression that you're aiming for, right? So then you've got that in the bag before going into the studio to track it, and you know what you're going to lay down, and there's no questions, and you can then focus on making that better as opposed to trying to get there. Right?
Yeah. And do you in that stage of the process, do you with the band make a distinction between is the goal for this song a single or an album cut?
Yep.
Because those are different kinds of songs,
absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. Right. And I would say that too depends on the number of songs you're recording. So if I'm in a situation where we're only, say, recording 3 songs and one of them is definitely not a single, then I'll press that. I'll be like, guys, you're only doing 3 songs here. You need all 3 of these to be singles because you want to do something with these 3. Don't waste a song, right? If you're releasing a record and only 3, 4, 5 of them are going to be singles, well, there's room for a little bit of an artsy fartsy, whatever you want to do, right? Or if you love this song or whatever. But 100%. There's album tracks and there's singles, and that would be the advice. If you're doing an EP kind of thing, make them all singles. If you're doing a record, we'll make a record, right? And a record can have flow and can have things happening in it because it's meant to be. Ideally, I mean, that's how records used to be. One presentation of some music, not just here's 10 random songs we wrote together, which, hey, that happens lots too. But
and to be totally honest with you, I don't understand how records are structured anymore because I'm not sure it's the same thing. Like
I know, right?
Full experience. I think there are some artists who, I mean, if you're like the Taylor Swift of the world, it is still a full experience that she is crafting. But I don't think artists who are not at that like absolute top tier level, I don't think albums are always crafted as a full body experience. They are sometimes bits and pieces. That's true.
I mean, you got to get really deep when you're doing one of those kind of a, whatever, if it's a theme album or something like that, you really got to dig into the creative process, which is great. And again, I think that probably comes down to time and budget. So if you've got the time in the world, great. But so those can take more time for sure.
Yeah, and definitely more budget.
That's right. Yeah. If you got the budget, let's do it. Let's spend 6 months in the studio and see what comes out. I'm for it. But
so, I mean, we talked a little bit about the songwriting, pre-production, crossover. Let's take a larger view of the like pre-production, studio time, post-production, mixing, mastering. Do you want to break down for people who don't understand the differences about those things, what those are?
Right. Well, the pre-production would be what we were just talking about, where prior to going into the studio, maybe, sometimes it's all in the same like couple weeks. You show up a week before you start tracking, and that's when you do your pre-production during that week. And then you start recording at the end of the week. Or sometimes it's a period of months where maybe you do a couple of those pre-production sessions as the band, writes more songs. You go do the one and then you come back 6 weeks later, they've got a fresh batch. You work on those. And so maybe, it all depends. It's really all about what your goal is for when you get to the studio. That's what you want to accomplish in the pre-production. Then the actual recording, that's where you'll have, let me go back to pre-production. You'll have your producer for pre-production, ideally. When you get to the recording, that's when maybe engineer shows up. That's when you're laying down your track. You're recording those parts for those songs that you've worked on in pre-production. So you're into the tracking now. With tracking, you have, some people call them beds, where the bed tracks is like just the basic drums, bass, rhythm guitars, maybe lead vocal, right? Just like basically what the band could perform live. You get those beds done. And then depending on your production style or whoever you're working with, whatever you want to do, you might then go into an overdub, another room, a smaller studio where you're going to do your overdubs, where you're going to add maybe guitar solos and maybe extra candy noises and keyboards and things that you want to spend a little time on or whatever you don't want to do on the fly, or you didn't have those musicians in the studio and whatever have you. So you get the recording done, right? And then on the at that point, depending on what you're doing while you're recording, you might have another guy on a separate rig over here doing all your editing at the same time if you've got the budget. Otherwise, after you record it, usually you got to do a little bit of editing, and that may involve a little bit of, moving things around if things need to be tightened up a little bit. Maybe a little bit of tuning if things are, you got a great vocal performance, but a couple notes are just a little wonky, but the vibe's there. Well, that's what the tools are for, right? So we do a little nudge, a little this, a little that. I like a very organic sounding thing, so I try not to do much editing at all. I really try and just get a good performance, and if it's loose, who cares, right? I mean, as long as it's not way off and way out, a little looseness. That's a little bit of lively. It's a little bit of human, and I think that's cool in a mix. And that's just a personal preference.
I'm with you on that. I think that also depends a little bit on the genre of music that you're working in. Some can bear that more than others. If you're in the real like R&B, like current day R&B or real new country, those are going to be tuned like crazy and all edited.
Exactly. Yeah. All buttoned up. No room for nothing.
Yeah. There's totally nothing organic about those.
Exactly. So there's that process, and then it goes on to mixing. So that's when everything's recorded. Everything's ideally, all the editing's been done. Everything's buttoned up. Mixing is, in my case, it's me doing it again, but oftentimes you'll go to a mix engineer after the fact, and they will take it into a room and balance all your tracks and maybe tweak some effects or add their own or whatever they want to do to give you that finished sounding mix of your song. And then from there, it then goes to yet another engineer called the mastering engineer. And that person will do the final touch. If you're doing it's more important if you're doing multiple songs, that the mastering engineer will take all those songs and balance all your kind of bass and treble levels and volume levels and make sure that as a cohesive grouping of songs that they're all relatively similar sounding in terms of the EQ and the volume and whatnot. And then they may fix any problems they hear, and it's the icing on the already elaborate cake, if you will. So actually it's probably even like a spray clear coat on an already.
It's the varnish.
It's just like there you go, right? Just makes it shine. So so those are all the people involved in the recording process. And again, oftentimes one guy will do all those things in the world. So then once you have that, you've got your files, then you're off to releasing the music, which is a whole nother thing these days. But the cool thing about streaming and everyone having access to the digital service providers, anyone can put out music, and anyone can hit up playlisters and pitch playlist people, and anybody can do that. There's nobody nobody has to sign you first. So that's kind of cool. Although, there's a lot out there. If you work hard enough, it's easier to get noticed. Yeah. If you're able to get noticed, right?
Yeah. And I don't know. Well, actually, I have a question, but I just want to touch on this first. If you are working with a big enough budget in the recording process, the other piece that I think is important just to know is that sometimes you record different things in different rooms. Like sometimes you might go to a certain studio to record specifically drums because it's a bigger room and drums do better in bigger rooms or what have you. So that can be a thing in the recording process too.
Definitely. You might go to that big room to do all your bed tracks, let's say, and you get everything done there, all the main parts. And then you could go to your smaller studio afterwards. So you're not paying for that big room for extra days. You go to that smaller room to save some money. And that's where you could do the things that really only require a microphone or two, as opposed to something like a drum kit or a guitar cabinet that needs a lot of space to be, blossom and flourish and form its waveforms and all that kind of stuff. Definitely. The what is it? There's a million ways to skin a cat or whatever, right? So, it's so many different combinations of the methods, but that's probably brings us back to why it's a good reason to have a producer who can help you just organize all that stuff and make sure that you get a product at the end. And, it's like they're your house contractor guy. They're going to make sure everyone does their stuff. And
they're the project manager.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. They're the one that you talk about what your goals are, your end goal with this song that you're making. What is it you want to do with it? Do you want to give it to grandma for Christmas?
Yeah.
Or do you want it to go to radio and all the Spotify playlists? And are you trying to get it to chart and, blah, blah, blah. Those are two very different goals. And so the process to get there is going to look different. And the money you spend on it is potentially going to look very different.
Definitely. Right. Yeah.
I don't know if you know the answers to these questions. I don't.
All right. Let's try.
But what do you know about, like, back in the day, you would hire a radio tracker, or if you were Chad, you would quit your job and become the radio tracker, and you'd go and make friends with all the radio people, and you would, do all that stuff yourself. Now that radio is like terrestrial radio is not the bulk of what's going on anymore. And now it's all about streaming and all of that. How do you do things like get added to playlists and that? Do you know what that process looks like for artists now?
I'm actually learning all about that right now. As I mentioned before, my bass player in default, Dave Benedict, him and I are partners in a couple other ventures. And one of those ventures is we started a rock record label this year.
Yes.
So we started a record label called Rock is Dead Records, and we did a distribution deal with 604. So we have, well, basically when we started the label, that was our big question. How do we do all this? What do we do? And then I spoke to Jonathan, and luckily he was interested. And basically, so the relationship that we have with them is their team, their digital DSP team and their marketing team and all the people that they have at 604 are able to work with us on all those things. So yes, this is a huge learning curve for us, and we're learning about all these different things. And some of the things that we're learning about are, when you do release, anyone can release something to streaming, of course, right? But you want to get it noticed. So, you might want to look into advertising on social media is one of the things that'll help your numbers, which your numbers are important because they help you get noticed by, I guess it's the algorithm or whatever people call it. Anyway, so one of the things that we're doing is learning how to, how much to spend. And we're only talking like hundreds of dollars for different things, not crazy amounts of money here. But we're learning about, what sort of platforms to advertise on social media wise. And that includes things like YouTube and obviously Facebook and Instagram and stuff, or even like TikTok, or, there's growth campaigns you can do on Spotify and other services like that. But learning how to manage those ads, learning how to watch the analytics and see if those ads are generating any clicks, or if you will, or generating any views on whatever you're advertising. Ideally, you're advertising for when you launch a single, or you're advertising for your video. It's things that are supporting your single release. So that's one part anyway, social media advertising. Another part is, as we're learning, there's, with Spotify specifically, there's Spotify for artists, where you can actually go in and send pitches to playlist curators directly and put them out there like that. And who knows if they get looked at or not? Ideally they do, but you have the ability to do that right through the artist platform with Spotify. I'm not sure what certain digital service providers like TuneCore or DistroKid, those ones that allow you to upload your songs to all those things in the first place. I don't know if they also offer pitching tools. I imagine they do have something like that, because we're working with a label that has the team already. That's what those people do, right? So, pitching the playlist. You can do this through Spotify. Working on a social media campaign. The other thing is really, so what Dave and I did early on is we worked on a calendar, basically, that's going to like it's a repeatable process for our releases. And our plan was to put out a single to streaming every 6 weeks. Yep. So we've got what happens basically it's a whole marketing plan of what needs to happen on each day and each week, having consistent content put out. And then we also got help from our project lead at 604 for more things that we could do, right? For different assets in terms of, photos and bios and a one sheet that like an interactive PDF that's basically what we used to call them EPKs, didn't we?
Yeah. Electronic press kits.
Yeah. Right. There you go. Right. Yeah. Having all that kind of stuff, ready to go. There's also, there's still the publicists out there that you can do PR campaigns with that that are helpful. They can get you interviews and maybe on some TV shows and stuff. And then you touched on radio there. So yeah, there's still radio trackers out there that if you've got the budget, you can hire and have them try and get your stuff played on radio. It is difficult because before, radio trackers were mostly hired by labels, and there was only however many labels, and only that much going to radio. But now, and for a while, anyone can go hire a radio tracker. There's tons of independent radio trackers out there. So not only do you have the guys at Warner and Sony and Universal lined up with their new artists, but then you've got all the independent guys in the line behind with all their artists. And personally, I don't feel like it's worth the cost for an independent artist unless you are signed and you have some more of that clout and that full-time radio team. It's really expensive, and that money would go so much further on advertising yourself on social media, I feel anyway. And that is the approach we're taking with our label. We're not doing any radio tracking just because it's just not in the budget. And that strategy was agreed with more or less, right? With the people we're working with at 604, they're like, yeah, that sounds like a good plan. It's tough. It's tough for indie artists. It's tough until you get something to hit. If you can get something to hit in some way, and that's the other beautiful thing about social media. You see old bands resurging on TikTok or whatever and making more money than they ever did in some cases. So yeah, it's just that constant push, that constant grind, and hopefully something hits. And if something does click, then that's the catalyst for everything. Then you can do whatever you want, right?
Yeah. So being the owner of a record label, how does an artist who would like to not be an indie artist, but would like to be a signed artist, make that transition? How does someone living in the middle of nowhere,
right,
get their stuff listened to? Not just in the door, but actually listened to and not in the bin.
Right. Well, I mean, and that's been a problem even when people were solely using entertainment lawyers to shop for record deals. And so that used to be the case. You'd have to hire an entertainment lawyer who already knew some labels and had some connections, who then could shop your stuff around. And most big labels would not accept a demo if it was unsolicited, if it was not sent by so-and-so Esquire. So now, I mean, social media, we talk about our friend Jonathan Simpkin. That guy's all over Twitter. You want to head a hold of him? Tweet him. Message him on Twitter. He'll read it. You'll see it. Right? It's like that's sort of the case now. You can.
His Twitter is quite a thing.
I know. Right? I know. But I mean, that's those. They're accessible. I mean, I see. The guy who owns Dynalone Records posting all the time, for instance. He's easy to get a hold of. Joel. I mean, I think that's the way to do it. You don't have to hire a lawyer. You don't even have to put anything in the mail anymore. You just got to find someone's email address or hit them up on social media, hit them up on one of their accounts with a link, and, all those assets that we talked about. If you've got all those on a really sharp looking one sheet type thing, you can click and see you can read the bio, you can click and hear music, you can click and watch a video. If it's really easy for somebody to check you out, that's the way to do it. Hit them up on social media and see what happens, and then keep hitting them up. If they don't get back, what are you going to do? You're either going to annoy them or get their attention. So you got to do one of those.
I mean, let's talk about that for just a second. The value of tenacity in this industry.
Yeah. It's valuable. I mean, you obviously still have to have something to back that up. You need to have.
Yes.
I mean, whatever talent, whatever. I mean, you practice. That's what you got to do. You got to be a well-practiced, player, singer, whatever you are, and take it seriously. And then, I think if something sounds good enough or looks good enough, you'll get noticed.
Is there anything else you think is really important for up and coming artists to know?
Boy, oh boy. Well, I hear a lot of artists talking about, we need an agent, we need a manager, we need this and that, the other thing, and they haven't even written 5 songs yet.
Yep.
Things like managers and agents. First of all, to get anybody who's worth a salt, who's worth a commission, you need to be able to make them a commission. You need to be, you need to be able to make enough money for them to make enough money for them to be interested. Obviously, that's going to take some time and some build up. And if you do have something that hits and suddenly you're viable, don't worry. Those people are going to come knocking. You're not going to have to look too hard to find an interested manager or an agent.
Yeah.
But it's tough because there's a lot of guys out there who, do call themselves managers and agents that don't really do well at what they do, but they work with indie bands and they, might sell themselves as whatever. And this is where my nobody is certified to do what they claim they do comment comes into play. But yeah, you got to be careful. If you are an indie band and you should know, no one's knocking your door, no one's banging your door down here. And then you got a guy coming at you with, hey, I'll manage you, just for a monthly fee or whatever, make my minute. Well, it's probably it may be the right guy, but it might not be the right guy. But further to the point, you probably don't need anybody. Until you can't manage yourself, you don't need a manager, right? And until you are able to sell enough tickets, you don't need an agent. You just need to get your stuff out there. You just need to try and get a song to break somehow, right? Those are that's the biggest thing to start with. So don't rush into trying to find a manager. Indie bands that want to find a manager, they probably don't know this or wouldn't admit to it, but it's kind of lazy. It's like, you don't need a manager. You just want somebody to do work for you that you don't want to do right now. It's not a lot of work, right? So yeah.
Well, I think sometimes it's work that you don't want to do. I think sometimes it's work that you don't know how to do.
Well, that's true too. Luckily, we've got YouTube, you can type just about anything in. How do I do this? And you'll get a ton of explanations on how to do that stuff. And yeah, definitely you want to build that up. I tell a lot of people too, that you want to understand how to book a gig. You want to understand what a manager should commission on. And you want to understand all these things before going in and getting in bed with anybody, because then you'll have an understanding of the business and you won't get screwed over, as we talked about. Right. So that, I guess that would be the other thing. Don't rush into trying to find other people to help you. Just focus on writing songs and getting good and practicing, and maybe do a little recording and do a little uploading and do a little social media ads.
Yeah. And getting heard. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. Play shows, get out there, play around town, get out on weekends if you can to go, to cities around you, close by. Just do it as much as you can. A lot of, I see this too. This is the other thing. I still am a huge proponent of touring and playing live. And there's a lot of marketing people and websites. They say, don't waste your money on tour. Well, guess what? Let's say you have a song blows up of yours somehow, and then you got labels coming to see you, and you've never played a show live, or you've played very few of them, and you stank. And that's just the fact. And then what happens? Do they leave?
Yeah.
How does that affect you? Right. So,
because playing live is a skill.
Yes.
That is a different skill than playing in your rehearsal space or playing in the studio or anything else. Playing live is a learned skill, and you are not going to be fabulous at it the first time you step on stage.
100%. Yeah. Learning to perform, that happens in the rehearsal room. Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. So you got to do it, and you got to play the shitty shows, and you got to be shitty playing the shitty shows before you're great.
Yep. And just do as many of them as you can, and then you'll get great.
Yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I guess, I don't know. I'm sure there's more advice somewhere in there, but
Well, where can people find you, Danny?
Web,
social media?
Website, dannycraig.com.
Yeah.
There's also rockisdeadrecords.com if you want to check out any of our, we've got two artists that we launched with, Chase the Bear and the Vitoes, which are both pretty cool bands. I think you've met Greta a few times. So
yeah, I have worked with some of the guys in the Vitoes.
There you go. Yeah. And then social media, I'm on like, Facebook and Instagram, but I'm not super active. I kind of suck at it. So honestly, email is the best, and you can get email off either of those websites.
Yeah.
And it's right to me. So that's where it is.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. This has
My
been
pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Great to chat. Great to just kind of hang out a little bit.
Definitely. We just needed cocktails. That's all we need.
Yeah, right?